Hi, I'm Tom Avis, and welcome to my video on the ambient audio in Nightingale. Today I'm going to talk about the unique challenges of the project and the solutions we came up with to not only meet the requirements, but also create an immersive and reactive ambient system to serve as an effective backdrop for all of the game's audio. Nightingale is a survival crafting game which features exploration, base building, and monster hunting. It was made using Unreal Engine 5 and Wise for audio. One of the unique features of the game are the realms, which are procedurally generated worlds in the form of various biomes, including forests, swamps, and deserts. The player's actions can affect the environment in several ways. For example, every tree the player sees can be chopped down, meaning that dense areas of forest can be completely leveled. The game also features realm cards, which have various gameplay effects, but can also affect the weather and skybox. Realm cards can be applied at any time by the player. There is a day-night cycle, dynamic weather, seasons, and changes in temperature. Nightingale features resource gathering, base building, and crafting, meaning that players are likely to spend a long time in a single realm, or even a single location. This means it was important to avoid repetition in the ambience. The realms feature procedurally generated water bodies, such as lakes, rivers, waterfalls, and coastline. There are flocks of birds in the sky that can travel great distances. And to top it off, we have points of interest dotted around the map, such as ruins and caves with large interiors that the player can explore. So those were the requirements. Now on to how we went about tackling them. We knew that we wouldn't be able to hand place audio emitters in the world for the majority of our ambience, so the solution had to rely on information gathered from the environment. The first system we worked on was a scan around the player to determine the positions and density of the trees around them. This scan happens every few seconds to check for trees coming in range as the player is moving. If the player is standing still, it ticks at a slower rate. This is because trees can be chopped down around them by other players or NPCs, so the density still needs to be updated. The scan uses two different radiuses to sort trees into an inner and outer layer. The inner layer would be used to trigger close perspective sounds, such as rustling leaves. The outer layer would be used to trigger general nature sounds. You can see the inner layer average position in green, and the outer layer average position in red. Each layer also has its own tree density value used to drive several parameters. I started with some ambient beds to use as a foundation, but it was important that there weren't any sounds that stood out too much, as this would contribute to noticeable repetition, which was important to avoid. There are several variations of each type, which blend together into one seamless bed. Each biome needed ambient beds for daytime, evening, and night, and these sit in a blend container in Wise. Although these are technically directional sounds, it wouldn't sound natural to use a pinpoint sound source, and instead the sound needed a certain amount of width. This was achieved by controlling the speaker panning and 3D spatialization mix in Wise. Here is the bed on its own. With the foundation in place, it was time to add some detail. I gathered as many individual bird and insect recordings as I could, which were suitable for each biome, and these were edited into short one-shots. Using the average tree position as a center point, these one-shots are then dotted around at random locations within a radius, at random time intervals. This randomness helps the ambience to feel organic and avoids repetition caused by exclusively using loops. The tree density controls the forest reverb amount. In a dense forest, the further away a bird is, the higher the reverb send. The one-shot system also ties into the time of day. We have birds, insects, and other wildlife, which you would usually hear during the day, and wildlife you would usually hear at night. Instead of using a basic blend container, this was set up so that the day one-shots become more sparse towards the evening, and the night one-shots ramp up towards nighttime. The night one-shots also have a longer random delay, so they're generally more sparse. This means we're not bombarded with owls and crickets, which would sound unnatural. After focusing on the forest biome, we ran into a problem in the desert. Although there were still a few trees to be found, there were also wide open areas of nothing but sand. We had to alter the ambience system for this biome so that you could still hear a few insects, even when there were no trees within scanning range. The wind also plays a bigger part in the desert to fill the space, which I'll get onto later. We now had a soundscape of seemingly invisible wildlife to give the impression of a living, breathing world. But Nightingale features wildlife roaming around that you can hunt, or in some cases avoid. We wanted the player to be able to hear distant calls from these creatures, and to be able to track them down using these audio cues. We developed a system where we were able to get the world locations of these creatures even when they were too far away to be rendered, and play back the occasional distant call. This event is called on the server, so your whole hunting party will hear the same sound in multiplayer. The distant calls also provide extra texture to the overall ambience, and help give the player an idea of the kinds of wildlife they'll find in each realm. Another case where we were able to trigger ambient sounds from real wildlife were flocks of birds that the visual effects team added. There are multiple bird types which can be found in different places around the map. For example, seagulls are positioned near the coast. Using the Niagara data, we were able to get the average position of each flock and play occasional bird calls from the nearest ones. This meant we weren't solely relying on invisible birds for our biome ambience. That covers most of the wildlife ambience in Nightingale. In the next video, I'll talk about how we used wind to give the realms more character and immersion.